Uganda forever.
Come on, sit down, start your bell work. I need your ID.
7 o'clock to 3.
Michael, come on. We don't have all day. You don't need your textbooks, you need your bell workout. Brody, let's go, sit down. Mason, you don't need your textbooks. On the desk, honey. You should be doing bell work. Why didn't you get that the first 5 minutes of class? How about it on that too? Do not get out.
Only for head.
I just said no quiz.
My dad doesn't feel That doesn't feel when I hear her.
Hey, sit down, hush.
Me?
Yes. Alright, once you get done with your bell work, make sure you get the notes page from the front table. Get the notes page from the front table. Make sure your name is on it and that you have a pencil out.
I can't read cursive.
Electrons are the electrons are the electrons.
Idiot.
It's not that easy. I can read it, but
Alright, so we're going to get into Bohr models, okay? We need to know that a Bohr model is the model of an atom. Brody, we do. Page the Bohr, page the Bohr. We need to know that a Bohr model is the model of the atom. It is the model that shows the electrons in fixed orbits around the nucleus. Those orbits are shells. Parents, whatever you're doing, stop. We need to know that a Bohr model will help you when we learn about atoms and bonding, how to form molecules, okay? Alright, so first we're going to set your notes page up. We already have a pre-set up notes page for you to follow along with. Alright, so Bohr models. Bohr models show electrons in fixed orbits called rings or shells, okay? Each shell can hold a specific maximum number of electrons. So down here we have Bohr model, which is the title of what we're going over. We have valence electrons are the electrons in the outermost shell. Make sure you're filling in your words. We're at the very top. Make sure you're filling in your words. You also need to fill in this chart. So we have shells 1 through 4. Each one of those shells can hold a certain number of electrons, okay? So we have shell number 1 can hold 2 electrons. Shell number 2 can hold 8 electrons. Shell number 3 can hold 18 electrons. Shell number 4 can hold 32 electrons. Make sure that you have filled in the blanks and filled in your chart at the top of your paper. This chart needs to be filled in.
Mrs. Chen, where's that board model show electrons and fixed orbits? Is it right there, fixed on the steps?
No, right there, it's at the top of your page. Just write what's on the paper. I put pieces of lines to the side so that you can see where you're supposed to write stuff. Alright, so we're gonna move on to step number 1. So the first step, you need to write that in the box, in the first step box. The first step is going to be to find the element. So right here in our examples, we have our nitrogen element. This looks like the element box in the periodic table. So we have N, which is our symbol for nitrogen. We have 7, which is our atomic number, and we have 14.006, which is our atomic mass. So we have found the element that we're working with on the periodic table. Then we're going to list our protons, electrons, and neutrons. All right, what charge does a proton have?
Positive.
What charge does an electron have?
Negative.
And what charge does a neutron have?
No
No
charge.
No charge, it's neutral. Alright, so after we have found our element on the table, we're going to write down how many protons, electrons, and neutrons we have. So to find the protons, we're going to look to the atomic number. Our atomic number is what?
7.
So how many protons do we have?
7.
Alright, again for neutrons, we're going to look at our atomic number, but we're also going to look at our atomic mass. So 14.006 rounded to the nearest whole number is what?
14.
14. Minus 7, which is our atomic number, is how much?
7.
So how many neutrons do we have? Now electrons, we look to the atomic number. Okay? Protons and electrons will be the same. So how many electrons do we have? 7. Aluminum, we're going to do the same thing. We have found our element box in the periodic table. Has an atomic number of 13, an atomic mass of 26.982. Okay. So for protons, we look at our atomic number. How many do we have? 13. For electrons, we look at our atomic number. How many do we have? 13. And for neutrons, we round our atomic mass. What's the nearest whole number going to be? 27 minus 13. 14. So how many neutrons do we have? 14. No, when you're done with that, it's all good. All right, number 2. This is step number 2. We are going to draw the nucleus. Okay, we need to show the number of protons and neutrons in our nucleus. We did part of this for our element project. So for nitrogen, we have our nucleus. Inside our nucleus, we have our protons and neutrons. How many protons do we have for nitrogen?
7.
How many neutrons?
7.
We draw our circle. This represents our nucleus. What about for aluminum?
13 and 14.
We have 13 protons, 14 neutrons, and our circle represents our nucleus. That's the center of your Bohr model, the center of your atom. So for step number 3, we're going to draw our first shell. How many electrons can our first shell hold? 2. How do you know that?
Two rods, it's two shells.
For choosing one.
Do it.
Because one shell can hold two electrons.
Because shell one can hold 2 electrons. Shell 2 can hold how many? 8. Alright, so first we're gonna draw our nucleus again. So we have our nitrogen nucleus with our 7 protons and our 7 neutrons. Then we draw our first shell. We start at the top and put our electrons. How many electrons do we put on this first shell?
2.
Make sure you're drawing your nucleus as well. Alright, what about for aluminum? We have our protons and neutrons, 13 protons, 14 neutrons in our nucleus. How many is in its first shell? 2. Alright, so for step number 4, we're going to draw the second shell. Okay? How many electrons can our second shell hold? 8. Okay? So, for nitrogen, we have our nucleus of our 7 protons and our 7 neutrons. We have our first shell, which it can hold how many?
8.
Our first shell?
2.
2. So we need how many electrons for nitrogen?
10.
Look back at step 1.
How many?
How many electrons?
7.
We need 7 electrons for our nitrogen Bohr model. So we have 2 in the first shell. How many more do we need? 5. We need 5 more. So on this outer shell, it can hold how many on the second shell? 8 electrons. We only need how many?
7.
5.
5. We only need 5 more. So we're going to start at the top again, draw our 2 electrons, move to the side, draw our 2 electrons, move to the other side, and put our last electron. Okay? How many electrons in total do we have? 7. We have 7. How many valence electrons do we have?
2.
Remember what valence is? 5. Because what are valence electrons?
The electrons on the outermost shell.
The electrons on the outermost shell. A synonym for valence is outermost. Remember, it's going to be that outermost shell. Okay? So nitrogen has 7 electrons. It is now stable. It's done. Aluminum, on the other hand, needs how many electrons?
14.
14.
Electrons?
Electrons. 13. You're right, 13. These electrons, we use 13 electrons. So we have our nucleus, we have our first shell, which holds our first 2 electrons. So on the second shell, how many electrons we're going to put? 8. That gives us how many so far? Huh? 10. Gives us 10 electrons so far. How many more do we need for aluminum to be complete?
Wait, 3.
3. We need 3. Make sure you're writing out the full step on each one. Alright, so for step number 5, if needed, we're going to add our third shell. Okay? So aluminum has 13 electrons. So we need to add 3 more electrons, so we're going to add our third shell. We're going to start at the top, we're going to put our 2, we're going to move to the bottom, or the side, we're going to put our 1. How many total electrons does the aluminum have now?
13.
How many valence electrons does it have now?
3.
3. sure you're drawing your nucleus, your first two shells, and then your third shell. Aluminum now has 13 electrons, so it is stable and it is done. Once you finish copying your notes, make sure that your name is on your notes. Put your name on this packet. Alright, so this packet that I just handed out, this is our periodic table basics lab, okay? So lab. So this is just a preface of what we're gonna get into this week, okay? So on the first page, it gives you instructions. We will get to these later. Okay? Flip to the next page. You have some questions that you'll answer about this activity, okay? We'll get to those later too, okay? Flip to the next page. You have element cards, okay? We're gonna be creating Bohr models and Lewis structures for each of the first 18 elements, okay? So in goal, we're gonna create our own periodic table. It's gonna be laid out on a poster, each of these cards, cut out and color-coded of the first 18 elements, okay? This will allow you to see some patterns in Lewis structures, valence electrons, okay? That's our end goal. So right now, we're gonna focus on filling out these cards, okay? I'm gonna do the first three with you, okay? So once you're done with your notes, flip to this page, flip to this page.
Page 186 now.
Page 186 in your book. Page 186 in your book. Alright, so on your cards, it gives us a place right above the symbol, 2 spaces below the symbol, and space for our protons, electrons, and neutrons, solid, liquid, and gas, Bohr model, Lewis structure, okay? So, this symbol, somebody tell me what element that is. Boron, okay? What is the atomic number for boron?
10.8.
Atomic number, look right above, 5. So we have 5 above our B, okay? That's our first blank. Then we have another blank under our B. What's the full name? Boron. Make sure you spell it right. So we have our atomic number, our symbol, our now we need the atomic mass. What's our atomic mass? 10.81. Okay, so now we're gonna move to our protons, electrons, and neutrons. So who remembers how we find protons? What do we look at? The atomic number. So what's our protons gonna be? 5. What about electrons? 5. All right. Who remembers how to find neutrons? So what is this going to be rounded? 11. So rounded, it's 11. Minus gives us
6.
So neutrons 6. All right. Now we're going to get into our Bohr model. Oh wait, solid liquid gas. Look at your element table, your periodic table. There's a key. Okay. It tells you which ones are solid, liquid, or gas. Okay. If it's in black bold letters, it's a left. If it's in purple letters,
It's a liquid.
if it's in red letters, it's a gas. So what is boron? A solid. It's a solid. It's a solid. All right. So Bohr model. For our Bohr model, we're not going to worry about the nucleus. We'll leave out the protons and neutrons. We're going to focus on the electrons. We're going to focus on the electrons. All right, so we're going to focus on just the electrons. Okay? So our first shell can hold how many? 2. So how many do we need? 2. On the first shell. So we put our 2. We're just focusing on the electrons. We're not going to worry about our nucleus, our protons, neutrons.
They gotta be up and down.
It can be both the top, up and down. However you want. If you want it to look balanced. Okay. So we have our 2 on our inner shell, our first shell. What about our second shell? How many do we need? 3. So we're going to put our 3. So how many total electrons do we have? How many do we need?
5.
Are we good?
Yes.
All right, move on to our Lewis structure. So we have our what? What is this?
Boron.
B, but what does B represent? It's the element's what?
Name.
Starts with an S. Symbol. It's the element symbol. Okay? B is the element symbol. It represents boron. So for boron's Lewis structure, we're only looking at the valence electrons. Okay? Remember, our Lewis structure is the same thing as an electron dot diagram. Do you remember those from your text? Okay? The dots around the symbol. That's what we're doing right here. So, how many valence electrons do we have in our Bohr model? 3. So how many dots are going to go around our boron? 3. So we're going to start at the top, side, bottom. Make sure you're copying this down. Alright. Everybody got it?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so we're going to move on to the next one. What's the symbol for our next one? Li. Find that on your periodic table. What is that?
Lithium.
What's the atomic number?
3.
What did we say the name was?
Lithium.
Make sure you spell it right. What is our atomic mass?
6.941.
6.941. Okay. Moving on to protons, neutrons, electrons. Protons, we look at what?
The atomic number.
The atomic number, which is what?
3.
So we have how many protons?
3.
Neutrons. Look at what?
7.
The atomic number. So we have how many?
3.
3 what?
4.
Neutrons, 3 neutrons. So for electrons, what are we gonna do first?
Look at the atomic mass number.
We're gonna look at the atomic mass number and do what?
Round it to the nearest whole number.
What is it gonna be rounded to the nearest?
7,
7
4,
minus
3,
equals,
4,
so how many electrons?
4.
Okay. Is our lithium a solid, a liquid, or a gas?
Solid.
A metal slate.
A solid.
A solid. Alright, so for our Bohr model,
We need
how many is gonna be in our first shell?
2.
2. What about our second shell?
1.
How many electrons do we need?
4.
So how many is gonna be in our second
2.
shell? 2. So how many total electrons do we have in our Bohr model?
4.
How many valence electrons?
2.
2.
So we look at how many. For the Bohr model, what we look at?
Electrons.
What is it, electron?
Electrons.
Well, we did the other one different. We did this one.
Right. No. Alright, so for boron, you should have 4 valence electrons. So make sure you add the last dot, the model, and the Lewis structure. That's my bad, I didn't catch that. We're going just by electrons for your Bohr model and Lewis structure. So for your Lewis structure of lithium, how many dots are you gonna have around?
4, 2.
2. Because how many valence electrons do you have?
2.
2. How can you determine what your valence electrons will be?
By looking at the outer one.
By looking at the outermost shell. So you put your 4 dots for lithium. That's what your Lewis structure should look like and what your Bohr model should look like. Does everyone have that copied down? Alright, since I messed up the first one, let's do one more. Alright, so Ne, what's the atomic number? 10. What's the element name? Neon. Okay, what's our atomic mass?
20.179.
20.179. So we have protons, neutrons, and electrons. How do we determine what our protons are?
Look at the atomic number.
So the atomic number is what?
10.
How many protons do we have?
10.
How do we determine our neutrons?
Look at the atomic number.
What's our atomic number?
10.
How many neutrons?
10.
Alright, so how do we determine how many electrons we have?
Round the atomic mass number to the nearest whole number.
We look at the atomic mass, we round it to the nearest whole number, which is what?
21.
Minus
10.
is 20.
21. It's not over 500. 20.
You look at the nearest 10.
180.
It's not over 5.
So
It's over 5.
this is gonna be rounded to 20, that's the nearest whole number, minus
10.
gives us
10.
which gives us how many electrons?
10.
10. Is neon a solid,
A
liquid, or
gas.
gas?
Gas.
It's a gas. So for our Bohr model, our first shell is gonna have how many?
2.
2. So how many more electrons do we need now?
8.
8.
So our next shell is gonna have how many?
8.
8. So we start at the top, 2, side, 2, side, 2, bottom, 2. So how many total electrons do we have?
10.
How many valence electrons do we have? 8. 8. So how many dots go around our Lewis structure?
8.
So we start at the top, move to the side, move to the other side, end at the bottom. If your Lewis structure has more than 8 dots, you've done something wrong, okay? If you get your Bohr model wrong, you're gonna get your Lewis structure wrong, okay? Remember how many electrons can go in each shell, okay? The first shell holds how many?
2.
The second shell holds how many? 8. It holds 8, but it doesn't have to have all 8, okay? Some may only need 5 valence electrons, okay? Alright, I want you to start working on helium. I'm gonna walk around and check as you do. Make sure you're using your periodic table. Make sure you're rounding your atomic mass.
On helium, the Bohr model, like, we already had one circle.
Okay.
Oh, never mind, I get it. Okay.
Alright, what's your next time? Helium is a little tricky, okay, remember? Outermost shell is your only shell, okay, for helium. So how many? Make sure you're saying whether it's a solid, liquid, or gas. Our electrons electronic number. Two. Our electrons are the same as our protons, so boys, not the X. No.
Cal.
Okay.
I'm finished.
Huh? That's right. So start writing on this one.
So hydrogen got some electrons?
Hey, hush. Okay, good Quentin, come sit down. You can spit out those chips.